Hello and welcome to Sama, Sisters Against Mental Abuse. I'm your host, Misty, and today we have on our show Chanta. Chanta is a therapist, a counselor, and she is also a survivor. She was also my therapist, but unfortunately, she's in Texas, and I'm no longer able to have access to her services, unfortunately. But if you are in Texas, look her up if you're looking for a therapist. She is amazing. She's approachable. She's very empathetic, and as you'll hear, she has her own story, so she does understand what we go through. So I'm not going to make you wait any longer. Here is my episode with Chanta. Hello, Chanta.
Hi.
Thank you for coming on today. I'm so excited to have you. I know for a fact, I know in my experience that you are an amazing therapist,
Thank you.
counselor. I mean, and I would like to call you friend as well.
Oh, thank you.
So thanks for coming on to share your story. Would you mind telling us a little bit about you and your background?
Sure, as far as my therapy background.
Yes, because I know you worked hard for where you are. So please brag.
So I attended the University of North Texas and got a bachelor's degree in communication, started working in a field. I worked in the auto insurance field for 18 years, but someone reminded me of my love and my passion to help people through, life. And so I ended up going back to school, getting my master's degree in counseling from Amberton University. And I remember, Misty, that I was like, oh, I'm done. I was like, okay, I'm going to be a therapist. Well, I didn't realize that there was a long journey ahead of me to become a fully licensed counselor. And so I actually put my career as a counselor on the back burner because of fear, because I took the state exam, failed it. And I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm just going to continue with my insurance career. But something kept nugging at me, tugging at me, saying that this was where I needed to be. So fast forward about 9 years after I had graduated with my master's, I sat for the exam again, and I failed by 6 points. And I said, you know what? Third time is a charm. I sat again for that exam, and I passed. And that's when God reminded me of why He had me in the place He had me in with my career, because He was preparing me for my greater and the things that I was going to be able to do to help people. So I started my career as a therapist. We have to have 3,000 hours of internship hours in order to be fully licensed here in the state of Texas. And so I worked in mental hospitals, I've worked at homeless shelters, drug addiction programs, I've worked with kids who are on probation. I've worked with CPS and helping parents be reunited with their children, providing those families with the necessary resources and tools to be better, for their children. Currently, I'm in a private practice setting, which is very rewarding. And so I work with individuals who are just trying to process and deal with whatever trauma, that they have experienced in life. And I try to give them that space where they feel supported, where they feel as though they're not going to be judged. And I also try to help guide them to understand that regardless of what you've been through, healing is still possible. So that's kind of my story. And
Wow.
there are great things coming. I'm, doing some other things in 2022 pertaining to therapy. So I'm excited about those things as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, because when I heard your story, I was like, wow, she really knew what she wanted and she didn't give up. And I
Mhm.
thought that's kind of inspirational to me too. And so you have all these awesome achievements, but there's a story here that I don't think that I've even heard before. You did mention that you had a relationship that was not as healthy as it
Mhm.
probably should have been, and I would love to hear, like, where you met this person and the kind of situations that you encountered while with this person, and then I really wanna know, after you share this story, I wanna know what kinds of takeaways did you have? as a therapist, as you became a counselor, and kind of what you learned from that. What were the takeaways? So if you could share that with us today, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. Absolutely. So I am currently divorced, but as you mentioned, I was married, and I was married for 3 years. But right when I was introduced to this person who we went to church together. So, when you think about people that are in the church and people that attend church, you don't think about brokenness or abuse or mental health. You see this person working, you're working in the church, you are doing your ministry, they're doing their ministry. So you feel from what it appears that this person is somebody that, yeah, that's gonna be the person that you want them to be. So at the time that I was introduced to this individual, my mother had just died. I was in a very vulnerable place and I needed someone to be there. And so he was there for the most part. And so I went through, dealing with my mother, dealing with things to kind of resolve some things with her. And this individual showed me signs, what I call red flags, but I was I think I was just like, you know what, everybody has something. So I'm just gonna push this. And when I tried to say, no, maybe this is not a good idea, that individual was like, well, no, I apologize. I won't do that again. So I was like, okay. So we moved in together. He moved into my home. There were still red flags. He was lying about some things. And, I was like, you don't have to lie to me. I just want you to be your authentic self. I want you to be your real self. But the problem with that was I would have probably saw what I saw in my marriage. So we got married, and it seemed like the more he got comfortable in his new life with me, the more he also got comfortable in allowing his mental health to show. Now, mind you, I was just coming into the intern stage of my mental health. So when I started to see certain things, I was like, well, that's, the mental abuse, the physical abuse, the spiritual abuse. I was like, that's not normal. Why would someone, my husband, not talk to me for 3 or 4 weeks, or call me out my name, or wrestle me to the ground, or not be supportive of, accuse me of things that I know aren't true. And so I was just like, something is not right, something is not right.
Hang on, I wanna take it back.
Yeah.
I wanna, what kinds of red flags did you see at the very beginning that made you
Mhm.
hesitant? What were the red flags when you were, moving in together? And then what were some of the red flags that, happened during the marriage? Like, what kind of incidents? Because I know that you just mentioned he wouldn't speak to you, but before
Right.
that, before you got married, were there different incidents that made you feel that way?
Yeah, absolutely. There was one particular incident that I can remember, where I went to a friend's house and I didn't have good reception where she lived. And this, we were dating. I didn't have good reception. So because I couldn't communicate with him, now, mind you, we had a long, in detail conversation. Hey, I'm going to this person's house. I'll probably be out a while. It's girls' night. I'll let you know when I make it, which I did. But because I couldn't constantly communicate with him, he started cussing me out. He called me about 10 or 13 times. And then because I didn't have reception, it was going to my voicemail. So then when I got in the car and I was able to get reception, it was all kind of name calling, you're lying. Why? I never heard of going somewhere and there's not reception. I'm like, that happens all the time with cell phones.
Mm.
And so he just became so just combative with me. And I felt scared at that point. I remember driving up in my driveway and I told, when I got home, I said, you know what, maybe this is not a good idea, because I'm not used to someone reacting like this, and I know I'm telling the truth. I've been with my homegirls all night having a good time. And then you ruin it because you're accusing me of being somewhere I wasn't supposed to, not taking your calls. I mean, it was vicious. Misty, it was, I couldn't even believe it, because like I said, I had never, and I was someone who dated and had, been in relationships. So I wasn't used to that. And so that was a red flag for me. The other red flag was when it came in for us moving in together, right before we moved in, he didn't want to tell me about his living situation, that he couldn't afford to take care of himself. So what he was doing was trying to attach himself to someone who could provide stability for him. Now, like I said, at this juncture, I have my own home, I have a job, I have these things, and I'm willing to share. So I was like, you don't have to lie to me. Just tell me, hey, I can't afford to be on my own. I can't, these are things that I'm not able to do. And even when it came to moving in, I mentioned it, but we never set a date. So one day I called him and I said, hey, what are you doing? He said, I'm moving in. And I was like, what?
But he
I,
told you, wait, he told you he was moving into your
yeah,
house?
yes. And I was at work and I was like, well, I know we talked about it, but I don't think we really talked about it to the point where we had made it concrete. So I was like, okay, he moved in. And that's when things, really got bad, because he was like, he didn't feel as though my home was his home. So I was trying to change my entire home to make, I sold furniture, I gave away things, just trying to make him feel comfortable, which once again, I was like, okay, this is something I should do. So I'm going to do it. But when it came to talking about finances, there were lies on top of lies as far as your credit score. I didn't realize that he could not afford to pay bill. Like everything was roommate style, 50-50, or when something broke down at the house, no, this your house. That's your responsibility. And I'm like, wait a minute, we both live here. Why wouldn't you support where we live? Um, and then of course there was a breaking point, but I don't want to get there too soon, and unless you want me to answer that.
Well, because
But
I do want to know. Okay, so you're seeing these red flags. He's lying. His temper is bad. It sounds like he's possessive, controlling. He's freaking out, and you're dating. And then also, you move past that, and he tells you he's gonna move into your place.
mhm.
So, in between these red flags, what is he saying to make you change your mind or to convince you to move forward with him? What kinds of things is he doing? And is it like a love bombing kind of thing where he's just so nice and so sweet to you for a while that you
Yeah.
forget things, or what is he doing to convince you to
Yeah,
stay?
it's just what you said. It's one of those things. Well, and later, of course, I found out the right term is manipulation. But it was, oh, babe, I'm sorry, I won't do that again. You my honey bunny. All those cute, affectionate names, hugging me, kissing me. And of course, I was, in a relationship. So of course, if we decided to have makeup sex, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. And once again, I was like, everybody has something, So I was trying to dismiss those red flags. And I was just like, okay, I know I want to be married. I know marriages work. I know there's no perfect relationship. There's no perfect marriage. So let me try to make this work. But I noticed it was a lot of me. Like I was trying to make it work. I was the one, giving up my life. I had stopped. I mean, I stopped traveling. I stopped smiling because every time we went out, and if there was, I will never forget this one incident. We went in a grocery store and one of his friends approached him. He accused me of looking at his friend and flirting with his friend. And I was like, now, so I'm not supposed to hold my head up and speak and smile, because I naturally smile. That's something I
Mm-hmm.
got from my mother. I was like, I'm not supposed to smile at people when they speak to me. I stopped smiling, because I was trying to make this work by any means necessary, because I had always wanted to be married. And so I got to where I withdrew a lot. People were like, oh, can you do this? I'm like, no, because if I went somewhere, I was always being accused of cheating, or he was having someone follow me. And he even told me one time, oh, I had somebody take all these pictures of this man's house she been in. And I said, well, why don't you send me the pictures? No, don't worry about it. Don't, I got my proof. And I was like, even that, I was like, I remember sitting in the parking lot, we argued for 30 minutes because he was accusing me of being with another man, and he had proof. And I was like, and later, of course, I was like, this man didn't even have enough money to buy a pot to piss in. So how could he afford a private investigator, to follow me around town? And I was like, I know where I've been, So I was just like, this is it was I was I was speechless.
Right.
Um, yeah. So
So he manages to convince you to move forward with the relationship, and then you all get married. How does that change things? Or it sounds like it intensified
it
those
did.
red flags
Hmm.
that you saw.
Hmm. Yes, ma'am. It did intensify him. Even the night of before our wedding, he made me cry. He was so mean, and I was like, dang, I was like, this is crazy. Like before my wedding, and it was like we could never just have a moment where he wasn't saying something out of the way or making me feel like a little girl or talking down to me. And of course, we got married, and I wanted to get married at the courthouse. I was like, because there was just something in me saying, I don't know if, and I had never been married, like I said, but I was like, I don't know if this is wedding, like I don't know if this is a wedding type situation.
Mm.
So I wanted to get married at the courthouse. He talked me out of that. He was like, you've never had a wedding, so we should get, have a wedding. Of course, he did his part, but of course I paid for a majority of the wedding. I thank God I had a lot of people gifting me stuff, and people supported us and rallied around us. He had been married before. And one thing I do regret is not doing my research before, because in most counties, a lot of things are public record. Had I pulled up those public records, I would have found out from his first divorce that this man was someone who was looking for a come up.
Oh, and what do you mean by that?
So in his first, and we had talked about it. He said, if we ever got divorced, um, I'm gonna sue you, which he did sue me. And I said, why would you want to take?
What?
Yes, I said, why would you want to take something from me? He said, because you have everything and I don't have anything. And I said, well, why didn't you sue your first wife? He said, because she didn't have nothing. We lived in an apartment. She worked, I worked. So she didn't have nothing. And had I read because of the divorce decrees are public record, people, had I read the prior divorce decree and did some research, I did this research as I'm going through a divorce, and I was like, but had I did that research, I would have known that he had some financial issues. There was a situation where he had a financial issue. And then also I would have known the reason for his first divorce. Um, but like I said, I had to find out for myself. I remember vividly, Misty, I signed us up for a marriage counsel. And he said, oh no, I signed us up for a couples retreat at church. And I really wanted to go. And he said, oh no, we're not doing that. That's spiritual abuse, because you're not feeding my spirit. You're not depositing positive things. You would call me out my name, hoes and tricks, and I was stupid. And, I didn't know how to how to be a good wife, and calling me overweight, and that's
Wow.
not feeding into my spirit.
And
That's breaking
so,
my spirit. Mhm.
because okay, wow, that's a lot. So I want to know, where did your pursuing of your license come in? Were you
Mm.
pursuing this while you were together? And then was it
Mhm.
like, hey, I'm learning this and now I can identify what these things are?
Mhm.
Or how did that play out?
Absolutely. So what happened, because I was such in a broken place in my marriage, and I realized that this person didn't no longer wanted to walk with me on a journey of growing together. I removed myself and I became single while married. And so, like I mentioned, fast forward 9 years later, I decided to sit for this exam again. Because my husband and I at the time, he wanted to start a business. I was all in. I was like, hey, let me get you started. Because financially, I was the one who could do that. I said, we're partners in this. Let me get you started. And I'll let you do everything else. Oh no, Trick, I don't want nothing for you. And when he said that to me, that was my notice
Wow.
to be Chanta. I was like, you know what? Let me go ahead and get my therapy license. Let me walk into the journey, into the career that God has called me to. So I started studying. I started really focusing on Shanta. I started traveling again, you know, because I saw that I can't change anybody if they don't want to be a vessel of change, you know. And so that's what I did. And while I was going through, and I found myself working with couples that were going through the same things that I was going through. And I was like, how can I help my couples, my clients, but I'm going through what they going through. I'm just as broken as they are. You know, I can't be good to anybody else if I'm not good to myself.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense. So, another thing, what did your support system look like at this time? I know that you said your mom had passed away,
Mhm.
but in this craziness with this guy treating you this way, did you have a support system, and were there any influences that either silenced you or helped you to get out?
So once again, going back to the church, this is not talked about amongst Christians, this type of abuse, because a lot of people go through stuff like this, but they don't talk about it. People just push it, you know, sweep it under the rug and be like, oh, well, you know, we'll be okay. And my circle, actually, as a matter of fact, they were all married and they couldn't believe it. And I even felt as though, because from what it looked like to me, their marriages were perfect. Well, come to find out, they some of them weren't, but you know, so I pulled back from them. Now, my friends that I had been knowing for over 20 years, they were supportive, but they were in shock because they were like, this is not the person that we see when we come over for dinner or come over for parties. You know, this is not the person that we imagine that you would be married to behind closed doors. You know, so it was hard for me to talk to people about what I was going through because people just couldn't believe it. It was like, wow, I couldn't talk to his family because they had their own perception of the man that he was. So,
Mhm.
and I didn't want to ruin that. I'm like, you know what, this is your uncle, your brother, your cousin. I didn't want to ruin that. So I just kept it to myself and I talked to God. I did a lot of crying. At one point I was working 4 jobs to stay out of the home, out of my home,
Wow.
as much as possible. I had moved out of my bedroom. I had just stopped. It was almost like he had stopped paying bills. I was paying all the bills, you know. And I was like, this is not what I signed up for.
So he had okay, and I hear this a lot because when I talk to other Black women, even in my own story,
Mhm.
everybody thinks that this guy is, this upstanding guy.
Yeah.
He's so nice, he's so kind, and it's almost like I don't know how to word this correctly. It's almost like this person shows them shows their friends and their family the absolute best side of them
Mhm.
constantly. It's like they're wearing a mask. They're almost grooming these people to
Mhm.
believe that no, it can't be him because he's
Mhm.
perfect. He's in the
Mhm.
church. He
Absolutely.
does this, he does that. And so yeah, that can cause an issue, especially if you leave this person and they start a smear campaign, which that's another episode. But yes, so and the dynamics of that is really, really hard to deal with because I know in my situation, I would think, wait, is it me? Like this
Mm.
guy's perfect. Is it
Mhm.
maybe I'm the one that should just look at what I'm doing. It can't
Right.
possibly
Right.
be him
Yeah.
because he's perfect. And
Yeah.
so I understand that that sounds like that's not fun at all. And I know
Yeah.
that there's a lot of other women in the same situation where they doubt themselves. So, but it sounds like you did something that was amazing for your mental health by pulling back and like you said you were married, but you were single. Like you
Yes.
knew what you were doing. You knew that
Mhm.
you had to kind of get your feelings out of it and you realize what was happening. So that's awesome. I wish I knew I wish I knew how to do that. That sounds awesome. So what kind of takeaways do you have from the perspective of a licensed counselor, a therapist? What kinds of lessons did you learn and all that jazz?
Yeah. One of the things after So there was an incident. So what brought me to filing for divorce? Because he wasn't going to do it. He was comfortable. He was in his element. What he knew was to be abusive. What he understood was to demean, hit below the belt. So there was an incident where I ended up in the hospital, and at that point, I knew that, and I drove myself to the hospital with a contusion on my head. He would not go. He refused to render me aid, and I'm his wife. And at that point, I knew something was wrong. And so I started to do my own research on mental health. I really started diving in to how the brain works, how trauma affects us. And walking away from my marriage, as hard as it was after being sued, after having to start over in some aspects, um, allow me to understand a few things. Mental health is real. Red flags, we cannot ignore those, especially in the African American community, because we do not seek the proper help that we need because for some reason it's a taboo.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, automatically, if you say that you're going to a therapist,
Right.
so you crazy, or
Yeah.
yeah. And I just talked about this the other day with another expert. She was saying that there's a lot of um microaggressions sometimes depending on the therapist. If you are a black woman
Hmm.
and you get maybe like a white therapist, there can be microaggressions, and that
Hmm.
deters people from wanting to go back.
Absolutely.
I've talked to other black women and they said, well, no, it didn't really work for me. I don't want to go back. It's not, people in our community do have a negative attitude toward it. And I think that they are not patient enough in finding the right person
Right.
for them.
Right.
Because after you, I had a hard time finding another therapist that I could just have a more of a conversation with, who understood what I was talking about. You get
Yeah.
a lot of therapists that are very cold,
Hmm.
or they're over analytical, when sometimes I want someone who understands what I'm talking about, my perspective, and you don't always find that. So we need to stop giving up and seek
Right.
out mental help, like
Absolutely. And you definitely said something. I was on a podcast yesterday and we were talking about mental health. And one of the clinicians on there, she was encouraging people, if you go to a therapist and it does not work for you, just like if you put a puzzle in a puzzle and it doesn't fit, you take it out. The same thing with you and your therapist. Remove yourself and find someone else. Um, because we owe it to ourselves to be our best selves, to be our whole selves. And that's another thing I learned about my marriage, is that I was able to heal and I'm able to open myself up for love now. Will it be trying for me? It will be, but I'm willing to allow someone to come in and love me properly. And I also realize that I am enough. Although my husband demeaned me and called me out of my name, I am enough. Everything about me, from my size to how I look and how I talk, I am enough. And that's what we have to understand too. When we come out of these situations and we're broken, we're bruised, we're battered, we got to remember we're enough and we can heal. We can put the pieces of the puzzle back together. And we owe it to ourselves to just be better, but I know now, red flags I do not ignore. I have blocked and deleted so many men in my
mhm.
dating journey. It's not funny, but I'm protecting my peace. I am protecting my peace of mind, my joy, my happiness. I'm protecting all that. I no longer give that away to anybody freely. That's no, that is going to come with, some time, dedication, and some proof that you have what I need. So,
Yeah, you are 100%. Look, I'm with you on that. So in closing, I do want to ask what kind of advice you have for other Black women that might be in a mentally abusive relationship, both as someone who has survived that situation and as a professional in this field. What kind of advice do you have?
um, I say first, make sure you have, if of course I don't condone any type of abuse, make sure you have a safety plan in place where if you are in a place where you are being severely abused physically, that you can get out. I know that it's easier to say than do. Be patient with yourself. Make sure you have someone that's willing to talk to you and support you. Also, if you have insurance, I'm a component for seeking mental health help. If you are looking for a therapist, LifeStance is a great place. That's where I'm currently located. I do virtual appointments. I take insurance, but calling your insurance provider, taking those EAP sessions, which I think you get like 3 for free. Do whatever you got to do to start the process, because if you got to start somewhere, you can't just keep sitting and thinking about it. Because one thing I saw in my marriage was my life flashed before my eyes when I ended up in that hospital, and I then became, well, I'm like, I'm gonna take this man out, and I'm like, oh no, I can't do that. So I had to make the choice that I love me enough to get out, to let it go, and that I love me enough to know that there is somebody out there that's going to love me and support me and provide for me the way I should be provided for and supported and loved.
Last thing, because I think that everyone is gonna wanna know. So you, because we really didn't go over this. So you had a contusion
Mhm.
from him?
So he was one that would provoke, and that's another thing too that I think a lot of people don't realize. We should not be provoking each other. So my ex-husband, my husband at the time, would provoke me. So I was out of the room, and he called me out of my name, and I went back because at this time I was tired. I was like, listen, you don't call me tricks and hoes enough. And so I went back in the room and I got close up in his face, which I knew was a trigger for him. He gets up and he backs up in my face, arguing and yelling at me. There's a 55-inch TV on top of an armoire in my bedroom. It falls on my head, it cracks, and the contusion just comes up. I mean, it was huge.
Wow.
And like I said, yes, I got in his face. I know that was one of his triggers, but he provoked me. So then when I said, I'm going to the hospital, we live maybe 2 minutes away from the hospital. He was like, well, I'm not going with you. And I was like, wait a minute, you're my husband. You want me to drive with this? He's like, don't go to the hospital. I was like, I'm not a doctor. Neither are you. I need to go see about, make sure I'm okay. When I walked in that ER, and they was like, ma'am, you drove yourself with this contusion on your head? I was like, yeah. And they immediately said, do you want us to call the police?
Wow. And you didn't call him,
I did
clearly.
not. I should have called the police, but I did not. And that's another thing that I encourage people to do: call the police. I did
Yes.
not, but call the police so they can have that on record, because my attorney said we probably would have had a better chance with the lawsuit, him contesting the divorce, had I had that on file, but I didn't. So yes, but yes, and that was my breaking point. I was like, there's something not right. And like I said, I get it. People go through domestic situations, but when I needed aid and my husband wouldn't drive me to the hospital,
Mhm.
I'm like, sir. So had I stopped breathing, it almost makes me think, had I stopped breathing, would you have left me there to die?
Mm, mm. Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, that is wow. I'm glad that you're okay and that you're here
Thank
with
you.
us and that you're able to share this story. Thank you so much for coming on
Yes, thank you
today.
for having me.
And that concludes our episode for today. Thank you for joining us. If you are a Black woman who has a story to share about mental abuse, whether with family, romantic partner, friendship, or you are a Black woman in the mental health field, please reach out to us, samatogethernow@gmail.com. We are on Facebook as Sisters Against Mental Abuse, and we are also on Instagram at Sama Together Now. Thank you for joining us, and remember, mental abuse is abuse.